Mishnah Berurah starts the halacha of Hilchas Rosh Hashanah. The Mishnah Berurah writes these words, we'll quote and translate. Ani ledoidi v'doidi li. Roshei Teivos Elul. V'seifei Teivos Oile Mem. The Roshei Teivos of Ani ledoidi v'doidi li spell the word Elul. And the Sofei Teivos, the last letters of these four words, are Gematria, the numeric value of them is Mem 40. Keneged Mem Yoim Miresh Chodesh Elul Ad Yoim HaKippurim. It's to resemble the 40 days that there are between Rosh Chodesh Elul until Motzei Yom Kippur. Ki be'elu arboim yoim hatshuva mikubeles liyois liboi koroiv el doidoi b'tshuva. Because during these 40 days, tshuva is very easily accepted for his heart to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with his words. Ve'oz doidoi koroiv loi lekabel tshuvasoi me'ahava. And during that period of time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol is closer to a person to accept his tshuva with love. To break it down in a little simpler terms, if somebody gets into a quarrel, a fight of some sort, insults, whatever it is, a friend, if the friend is having already some sort of bad day and as it is has some sort of distant feelings towards the person, the odds of the friend forgiving quickly are much less, much slimmer than if the person does the same exact action on the day that their friend is having the greatest day and everything's happy. Because when you're happy, you're easy to forgive. And when you feel close to somebody, you're easy to forgive. The more distance that there is, the harder it is for somebody to forgive. Kavyachol, God, throughout the year there's a certain amount of distance. Our actions cause a certain amount of distance. When it comes to these 40 days, all the distance falls apart. He's right there near us, and no matter how we go about it, as long as we make a move, He's there to accept whatever it is that we do. Chofetz Chaim says a phenomenal parable to explain this concept. He says there are a group of kids going out to the beach, and they're sitting there on the sand playing, building castles. All of them are together, keeping some sort of distance from the water. There's one child that's right by the water, and he's not playing with the rest of his friends. The wise man walks by and sees a kid all lonely and bothers him. Why is the kid all alone? He walks up to the child and he says, "Tell me something, why are you all alone?" And the kid says, "Because I'm waiting." And he says, "What are you waiting for?" And he says, "I'm waiting for a cruise ship to come by." And he tells him, "What, you never seen a cruise ship before?" And he says, "Yeah, I've seen a cruise ship, but this one is special to me." And he says, "Why is it special?" And he takes a little piece of flag out of his pocket, a piece of fabric, and he shows it to him. And he says, "Because when the cruise ship goes by, I'm going to wave this fabric to the captain of the ship." And the guy looks at him and says, "Wave the fabric to the captain of the ship? The ship can't come close to shore either way. The captain is busy leading the ship. The last thing in the world he's interested is in some kid on the shore. You're going to wave to him. He's not even going to see you. You're going to get disappointed. You'll go home crying. Don't waste your time. Go play with your friends." The kid looks at this wise man and tells him, "Not only am I going to wave this piece of fabric, which I call my flag, to the captain of the ship, you can wait here and see. As soon as he comes by, he's going to slow down a little bit. He's going to observe. He'll wait for me to wave, and then he's going to wave right back." And now the guy looks at his child, "You lost your mind. Nobody's waving to you. You're not waving to nobody. Nobody's even going to see you. You're going unnoticed. Don't fool yourself. Go play with your friends." The kid looks back at him and says, "This is not just a random ship that's supposed to come by. The captain of that ship happens to be my father. He's away all year. I don't get to see him all year. But when he finally does come by the shores of the neighborhood that I live in, we have a deal. I go to the shore with a red piece of flag. He has the other side of the flag. I wave, and he waves back. And that's how I know my father is still there for me, even though he's distant." So like the Chofetz Chaim, a whole year a person waves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol. He prays, he does different things, he this and that. He feels that God's very distant. There's no answer. We don't realize that there is an answer. The answer is no. But it seems to us that there's no answer. Comes these 40 days, we're like the child on the ocean. We have the innocent purity. that we know that this part of the year is the time that God comes right by our neighborhood. And all He says is, wave to me. And as soon as you wave, He's right there to wave right back. The mistake in our approach towards life in general is we view things to our convenience. To explain what we mean and break it down a little more, because this is very important, we'll use a parable of the Dubno Maggid. The Dubno Maggid says there was once a guy, not the brightest. He was a salesman of hay. So he'd go out to the fields, he'd cut, he'd stack them up, put them on the back of his wagon, bring them to his storage, wait for it to dry out. Once it's dry and it's good hay, a couple of months a year, he'd sell whatever he saved the whole year. One day, he takes his horse and wagon, he fills up the wagon, but this time he had a lot of hay to bring, and he says, instead of me going twice, back and forth in the heat, who needs this? Let me just stock it all up in one big pile, and I'll save myself a trip, I'll get home earlier. So he goes ahead, he stocks up the hay, humongous pile, ties it, secures it really tight to make sure it doesn't turn over, takes his little horse, and he's going back home. When he comes to his storage house, the entrance to the storage house that normally he would walk right into and push the wagon into to unload, the height of it is only 12 feet. And this guy stocked up hay 15 feet. So when he comes to the door and he's trying to get in, obviously he can't get in. The hay is too high. And he's getting frustrated and he's hitting the horse. Come on, go in. And the poor horse says, what do you want from me? I can't go in. It's too high. It's stuck. And he's hitting and hitting. Nothing's doing. Comes out and he's broken. He's like, my whole idea is worthless. Now I can't even get in to unload. Some guy walks by, sees what's going on, and realizes this guy's an imbecile and says, let me take advantage of the situation. He walks up to him and says, sir, you need a solution to your problem? And he says, yes. He says, watch this. He pulls out of his pocket a small magnifying glass and he hands it to him. And he says, look at the door of your place. And he says, what do you want me to do? He says, no, look through the glass and see the door of your place. He says, fine. Takes the glass, the magnifying glass makes it 4 times bigger, and now it looks like he has a 48-foot high entrance. He says, look at that, we just solved the problem. Now go in together with the hay. The guy likes the idea, and he's about to go, and he says, but wait a second, first pay me for the magnifying glass. He says, how much do you want? He says, $50. He says, here you got it. He's trying to go in, and of course, it's not going. He jumps off the horse, he runs back to this guy, and says, you crook! It didn't work. I couldn't get in. Give me back my money, take back your glass. And the guy says, no, let me explain to you why I didn't get in. Let me show you the problem. He says, what? He says, take the same piece of glass and now look at the hay. And he looks at the hay, and from a 15-feet pile, it now looks 4 times bigger. It's 60 feet tall. So he says, yes, it's true. We made the entrance 48 feet high. But the hay now became 60 feet. There's no way you can get in. So he says, okay, so you didn't solve my problem, so give me back my money. So the guy tells him, I have a solution. So he says, what's the solution? He says, when you look at the door, look through one side of the glass. And when you look at your hay, turn the glass around, and when you look through a magnifying glass the opposite way, the objects become smaller. And not only won't your hay be 15 feet, it'll shrink, it'll only be 7.5 feet. He likes the idea, he says, fine. And as this guy is starting to look through on the big side to make the door bigger, this crook goes away, runs away. He tries to get in, doesn't get in. He's getting angry, he's getting angry, he's getting angry. Somebody else walks by, sees this whole thing going on, says, what's going on there? So he tells him the whole story. So the guy starts laughing and says, Shoyte Sheboilam, you can't choose which way you want to look through the glass. If you look through the glass the big way, so everything's big. And if you look through the glass the small way, so everything's small, including to the doorpost. You can't pick and decide, when I look at the doorpost, I want it to look big, and when I look at the hay, I want it to look small. That's the parable. Comes the Dubno Maggid and says, what does the Yetzer Hara do with us? When it comes to Averas, he tells us to look through the glass on the side that a sin looks small. Big deal, it's only a custom. Big deal, it's only a chumrah. Or this one's not applicable, Bizman Hazeh, that's a new one. Or everybody's doing it. Once a girl told me, I don't dress sneerstic. So I said, why not? She says, because everybody else doesn't either in my community. I said, and therefore what? 2 wrongs don't make a right. She says, what should I do? If I'm going to be the only one in Gan Eden and everybody else is going to be in Gehenna, I'll have no friends. So I want to join the Chevra. Okay, that was her way of thinking. When it comes to tshuva, the Yetzer Hara comes and takes the magnifying glass and says, look through the big way. God's the most forgiving thing that there is. You don't even have to do tshuva. Just show up in shul. Everything will be fine. You're guaranteed a good year. Don't worry about it. Then you forget to do tshuva, and he got you. But that's the problem. If something's important to you, it has to be important to you on both ends of the spectrum. If something's not important, so forget about the whole thing. To choose, this is a big deal and this is not a big deal, that's already a false way of living life. There's a famous story of one of the old rabbis in Europe. And when he used to daven, he would start at one end of the room and he would end at the other end of the room. He would get so into it, he would jump, he would dance, he would laugh, he would cry. It was a whole procedure. And he just lost track of anything around him. And people used to observe this, many with admiration. What a wonderful man, look how he prays. And others would mock it. They'd say, the guy's nuts. Come on, stand still, praying, and what are you doing? One day there was an outsider from town, and he comes and he sees this Rebbe, he's crying and dancing and moving and back and shaking, and he doesn't get it. What's going on here? No. He's at the end of davening, he needs a place to eat breakfast, so he asks the Gabbai, where could I eat? So the Gabbai tells him, listen, the Rebbe's wife, she's a very good host, she cooks well too. Go up to her, tell her you need breakfast, she'll gladly give you a good meal. It's Friday morning, he goes up to the Rebbetzin, he knocks on the door, she opens the door, he goes in, she says, yeah, how could I help you? He says, listen, I was just in your husband's shul, I prayed, I'm hungry, do me a favor, give me something to eat. The lady says, gladly, come sit down. She's serving him, he sits down, he says hello, she says, how are you? They start a conversation, where do you come from, so on and so forth. And then she asks him, how are you enjoying your visit? So she says, I'm sorry to be the one to ask this so bluntly, but is your husband okay? And she says, what do you mean? He says, I just prayed Shacharis with him, and it looks like he has issues. Something's wrong. So he says, what do you mean? He says, the guy couldn't stand still for a minute. Every 2 minutes he was either laughing or crying or singing. Or there was no consistency in anything he was doing. He says, and not only that, he started Shemona Esrei at one end of the room, he ended at the other. Is everything okay? And the woman is trying to explain to him. He has dveikus, he's connected to God. Little by little he's beginning to understand. Finally he says, I understand everything, but one thing I don't understand. Why did he start screaming in the middle? So he says, what do you mean? He says, he was in the middle of davening and he started screaming. Why is he screaming? God can hear a whisper too. Why did he scream? And the Rebbetzin looks at him and says, because when something comes from deep down inside, sometimes you scream. And he says, no, I don't agree with that. That can't be. Nobody's like that. We disagree. So she tells him again, if something's important to you, and you really care, and it comes from deep down inside, sometimes you scream. And he doesn't want to buy into it. The gentleman's supposed to leave town before the weekend. Something goes wrong in his plans. He misses his train, and now he's stuck in this town for Shabbos. He needs a place to go eat. He already feels comfortable with the Rebbetzin. Friday afternoon before the Zman, he knocks on the door and he says, Rebbetzin, listen, I'm stuck here for the weekend. Can I join you for Shabbos? The Rebbetzin looks at him and smiles and says, gladly, you're welcome. We even have a guest house for you. But I just got to pre-warn you one thing. If you thought that my husband does interesting things by Shacharis, wait until you see him sing Shalom Aleichem. This is really going to be a sight. He says, don't worry, as long as the food is good, I'm in. Let's do it. And he joins for Shabbos. It's 5 minutes before Shkia, and he realizes, wait a minute, I got a lot of money on me, and to leave it in the guest house outside is not the smartest idea. Somebody might break in, they'll steal it. What's going to be? I got to put it somewhere safe. Now, where's he going to put the money? So he goes to the Rebbetzin and he tells her, listen, I need somewhere to hide my money. So she says, what do you mean? Put it wherever you want. No, I need somewhere safe. It's a large amount of money. So she tells him, listen, we don't have safes here, we have no valuables. If you want, go to the Sfarim room, take a whatever, stick it there somewhere, hide it behind the safe. So she shows him where the room is, he goes to the top shelf, he sticks it on top. Shabbos. There was never a Shabbos in his life that he looked at the Sfarim as much as he did that Shabbos, making sure everything's okay. He goes to pray Ma'ariv Motzei Shabbos, and by the Rebbe's, Ma'ariv is a whole ceremony, and it has to start late, that's part of being a Rebbe. And by the time he comes back home, the Zman is already way over, it's after Shabbos, and the first thing he does, no Havdalah, no nothing, goes running to the Sfarim room, and he wants to take his money. He comes to get his money, and there's nothing there. He runs to the Rebbetzin and says, Rebbetzin, what happened to my money? She says, what money? What do you mean, what money? The money I hid in your house Friday afternoon. He says, what money? I don't know what you're talking about. He says, you don't know what I'm talking about. You were the only person in the world that saw where I hid it. You stole it. Give me back my money. And he starts shrieking at her. And the lady says, wait a second, why are you screaming? Maybe you should whisper. And he says, whisper? You're stealing my money. He says, and so what? He says, it's my hard-earned money. It's important to me. The Rebbetzin pauses, smiles, gives him back his money, and says, didn't we just learn that when something's important to you, you scream? And the guy learned his lesson. The level of importance of what we do shows in our actions and our emotions and in the value and how much sacrifice we're willing to give and do for it. And when somebody's willing to go to an extreme in order to get something that they really want. Recently I met a considerably young girl. She's 23 years old. And I see her driving a new Maserati. I was pretty impressed. $180,000 car, 23-year-old kid. Her parents are as broke as could be. I said, what's going on here? So, I'm not shy. I walked up to her. I said, oh, congrats on the new car. She said, Rabbi, you would love this one. I said, I know, but I can't take a ride. And I said, but where's the money from? She said, I'll tell you the truth. I work. I live at home. I have no living expenses. My parents buy me more or less whatever I need. The only thing I really like in life is cars. I took a second job. Between two salaries that I make, working 16 hours a day, I save up all my money, and I lease the car. The lease is about $3,500 to $4,000 a month. That much money I make, and that's how I have the car that I have. Okay, honestly, I thought it was a little crazy. I didn't say much. I said, hopefully he'll drive it to only good places. I walked away. That night I had to speak. I didn't have much to say, and suddenly this car came to my mind. I said, Rabbeinu Shalom, this girl just taught me the greatest life lesson. When something's important to you, you make it happen. This is what the Rabbeinu Shalom tells us. I'm going to assess what was important to you throughout the entire year. And I'm going to estimate and assess how much effort you put into making whatever it was that you wanted to make it happen. And then I'm going to see if, when it came to things that I wanted you to do, you put in an equal effort to make them happen, or suddenly God's will was a second-class citizen. There was a while I was giving a women's class for married women here in town. And it was kind of a weekly thing. And there was a certain amount of regulars that were there every week. And when somebody was missing, it was obvious that something was wrong. This was, I think, about a week before Yom Kippur, and one of the women that comes didn't show up. And a couple of days later, I happened to bump into her, and I said, we missed you by the Shia. And she says, you know, you're right, but I couldn't find the babysitter. I said, let me ask you something. She says, what? I said, if your husband would have came to you the same night, and says, honey, it's your birthday, listen, I got you a gift card on Saks Fifth Avenue, $5,000, it's expiring tomorrow morning. Would have you found the babysitter? She says, no doubt about it. I said, aha, so 4 days before Yom Kippur, $5,000 in Saks was more important than a shir. What's Yom Kippur going to look like? That if you didn't care about this, you didn't care about this, you didn't care about... So you're a reckless person, you don't care. Okay, so you don't care about mitzvahs either, fine. But if Hashem sees you care about everything, but when it comes to His mitzvah, that's when you don't care, there you're in big trouble. Part 2. Part 3 is we have to remember that the Gemara says, everything we do, breathe, say, or think, including what we feel, the Maharal breaks this down at great length, is documented upstairs. It's documented in the format of a video, in the highest technology, and the thoughts talk for themselves. The Gemara teaches us that after 120 years, we're going to go up to the grand theater that God's going to host, and there's going to be a large audience there, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and all the tzaddikim of our generation, plus Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, and Shlomo, together with the Imois, and they're going to watch a video. The main actor is not going to be Robert De Niro, nor any other actor or actress that you like, but it's going to be yourself. The acting school that you went to is 120 years of life that you're on this earth. You're the character, you're the lead role, you're the effects, you're the thoughts, you're the sound, you're everything. And you, sitting up front, together with all these people, side by side with God, are going to watch the video of your life. And that video really depends on the way you look today, because that's what it's going to be. You're in the middle of the filming. You're on set, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To understand what this means and to appreciate the idea behind this, I want to tell you a story that happens to be a true story that happened in Israel. In Tel Aviv, there are many neighborhoods, just like in New York City. There's where the wealthy people live, like Ramat Aviv Gimel and other neighborhoods like that. And then there's the areas that people that don't have that much money live in. And they're just a couple of kilometers away, a few blocks up. You can go from having homes that are worth millions of dollars to having places that people don't have electricity. One of these kids that grew up in Ramat Aviv, youngster, wealthy family, his father's a very famous, successful person, has everything in the world, one day decided that I have money, I have a beautiful house, I have the greatest life, I have whatever it is, but I'm still not happy. It's time to go look for spirituality. It's embarrassing to say, but most of the Israeli kids, when they look for spirituality, instead of starting in Yerushalayim or somewhere rational like that, they normally start in India. And this kid gives up on his Daxiana bed, and he gives up on his fancy car, and takes a flight to India, and starts living on a cot in a youth hostel, and eating the Indian food that just from the odor alone you lose your appetite, and this is the life that he's looking. Why? Because he hears that in India people are spiritual. He goes from monk to monk, from guru to guru, from meditation to meditation, but it's just not cutting it. His soul is still crying. Comes back to Israel to see his family and to reload on money. And while he's in Israel, the first day he's back, he's driving on his new motorcycle that his dad got him as a birthday gift. On the street, he's by a red light, a youngster walks over to him and gives him a piece of paper. This piece of paper was a flyer, an advertisement for a Torah class, one of the famous Israeli speakers, and the topic was finding true meaning in life. He says, you know what, I tried India, let me try here, maybe these guys have what to sell. And he goes into this class, he's glued to his chair for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and he's fascinated. Walks over to the speaker afterwards and tells him, listen, I've never heard anything like this in my life before, where can I hear more? And this guy was, out on a mission, of course. And when he heard that was the greatest thing, that he made his night. He goes, where could you hear more? This weekend we have a Shabbaton, come, join us, you learn whatever you want. He goes 4 days to a weekend in Arad, he interacts with the speakers, he hears all these wonderful things, he learns, he challenges, he asks, he gets answers. And at the end of the 4 days he walks away and says, there's a God in the world, and I'm going to follow his way. Comes back to Ramat Aviv, but this time with one difference. Missing an earring, and instead a yarmulke. His father sees him by the door, and his father almost collapses. He says, what happened to you? He says, Dad, listen, I was looking for spirituality, and I found it. And his father said, but why by the Orthodox? He says, because they were the only ones that had something to sell. And his father starts arguing with him, and the kid looks at his father and tells him these words. You always said that you believe in freedom of choice. You always said that you believe in freedom of expression. This is your test. If you really believe that I can be free, then accept me any way I am. And if not, then at least admit you're a hypocrite. His father hears that, and he's stuck. He's not going to say he's a hypocrite, that's for sure. And he says, okay, if that's what makes you happy, I respect it. And he sticks to his promise and he respects it. A couple of months down the line, this guy is walking late at night, and as he's walking the street late at night, he bumps into a young girl. This young girl looks kind of lost, and she walks up to him and asks him, do you know where this and this building is? And he says, yeah, that's a synagogue, and it's 1 block away. And so he says, thank you very much. And he says, by the way, why are you going there? What's going on? And the girl tells him, there's a class there tonight, and I want to go hear the class. And he says, what class is there tonight? She says, there's a class by this and the speaker, happened to be the same rabbi that he heard originally, and the topic is the meaning of life. The guy smirks, smiles, and says, it's a really good class, you should go. Then he decides, you know what, let me do round 2 of this class, I'll go in too. So he starts walking her to the speech. On the way they're talking, why are you coming, where do you come from? And she lives in the poverty-stricken neighborhood of Tel Aviv. She tells him, listen, I have nothing in my life, no education, no money, no family, in my house we have electricity a few days a week, depending when the company disconnects it or not. Water we forgot about months ago. I don't see a reason to live. I was walking down the street, a young boy came to me, handed me this flyer, the meaning of life. I couldn't even afford a cab to get across town. I walked all the way here 4 kilometers. And I want to see, maybe there's some meaning even though I have nothing. They go into the class, they sit together, they hear the class, she's fascinated, she goes over to the speaker, she asks a few questions, she gets a few answers, and then the speaker says to her, we have a Shabbaton this weekend, maybe you'd like to join. The girl says, I would love to join, but I can't afford buying a new set of clothes. You think I can afford a weekend in a hotel? This guy overhears the conversation, he takes out his credit card, and he says, it's on me, go. She says, thank you very much. He swipes the card, he pays for her reservation at the Shabbaton. She says, can I get your number? He says, gladly, here's my number, anything you need. Where do you live? Ramat Aviv. Now in Israel, between the poor and the rich, there's such a big gap that they normally don't even talk to each other. And when this girl sees that this guy lives in Ramat Aviv is talking to her, that alone is like a little bit of a shock. She goes, 4 days, hears some nice classes, asks some nice questions. At the end of 4 days, acknowledges God and says, I'm going to change my way of life. This guy is curious what happened to this girl. He calls a couple weeks later to follow up, and she tells him, I started becoming religious. And he tells her an interesting thing. Let me tell you my story. Just a few months ago, I also was I wasn't walking on the street, I was driving on my bike, I got a flyer, I went to the same Shabbaton, same thing happened to me, we're in the same boat, and this is how they start talking. After a few weeks, he develops feeling for the girl and decides that he wants to consider marrying her. But now he has to go present to his rich and famous father that he wants to marry a girl that doesn't even have 50 cents in her savings account. And that's going to be a challenge. He thinks to himself when he says, I can't go to my father again and give him the same story of freedom and choice and this and that. He's just not going to buy into it twice. What do I do? He comes up with a plan. For a couple of days, he stays locked into his room. He looks all depressed. Puts up a good act. After 2-3 days, his father can't deal with it. He goes in, and his father sits down with him and tells him, what's going on? What happened? What are you missing? You need anything? Did anything happen? Anybody started up with you? And, Israelis are hot-blooded. Somebody did something to you, we'll kill him! What happened? And he says, Dad, I'll be honest with you. There's this girl that I like, and I can't find a matchmaker that could put us together. His father said, what do you mean? We'll hire any matchmaker in the world. What's the big deal? So he says, okay, so hire somebody. And he hires a matchmaker. He sits down with the matchmaker and tells the matchmaker this. My dad is rich. Cash in on him, I don't mind. Here's the deal. I want to marry a girl that comes from a very poverty-stricken neighborhood, from a family that my parents will never accept. Figure out a way to market this. The guy goes to the father and he tells him, listen, Dad, it's going to be a really tough job to get this girl for your son. You got to pay me well. And you got to go along with whatever I say blindly. And the father sees his son depressed. He can't see his son looking this way. And he says, fine, I'm going along with it. Whatever it is, I'm doing. And little by little, he starts breaking him the news that the girl actually doesn't really live in Ramat Aviv. She lives in a different neighborhood. Her parents are not the most educated. They're kind of somewhere in the middle. The mom's education is somewhere between making potato kugel and rice. The father's education is a plumber. And he's like breaking him the news. It's not that bad. Nobody has to know. We'll buy them nice clothes. We'll get them. It's covering up for everything. After a couple of weeks' work, finally he gets the deal together. But right before the engagement, the father of the boy says one thing. I want to make an extremely glamorous wedding, but I don't want to feel taken advantage of. These guys have no money. So this is the deal. 90% of the wedding I'm paying, but 10% they have to pay. 10%? Okay. How much is the wedding going to cost? $250,000. $25,000 for a poverty-stricken guy is kind of hard. So the guy goes to his daughter and says, I'm sorry, I don't have $25,000. So she starts telling him, we'll put it together, we'll borrow, we'll this, we'll get charity, we'll talk to people. Just that, I want to marry this guy. And then she also tells him, listen, he's a rich kid, I'll marry him, we'll have money, I'll pay you back already, don't worry about it, everything will be fine. Finally the father says yes, they make the engagement, they have a wedding day. A week before the wedding, father of the boy, rich guy, calls up father of the girl, poor guy, and says, I hope you got my money. And right when you walk into that wedding hall, before the chuppah, I'm going to count the cash. So make sure you bring it. And the guy tells him, don't worry, I got it. The morning of the wedding, everybody gets ready, they go to the hall, and this guy counts $25,000 cash and sticks it into his pocket. Comes to the wedding. The guy forgets to ask him for the money at the beginning of the wedding. They go through the wedding and that, everything's beautiful, chuppah, party, great, unbelievable. And in the middle of the wedding, they're dancing. Now the Sephardic custom is before the groom really dances with many people, the two fathers dance. And that's kind of a symbolic thing, because the odds are they're not going to get along 2 days later anyway, so at least one night they should dance, it should look good for the pictures. This guy is dancing, and this rich guy is taking his mechitin and he's spinning him around, and they're having the time of their life. He gets hot in the middle, he takes his jacket off, he puts it on the back of the chair, they continue dancing. 15 minutes later, he goes to put back his jacket on, he feels his jacket's a little lighter, sticks his hand to his pocket, almost faints, there's no money. Ouch. What's he going to do? Right before dessert, his mechitin comes over to him and he tells him, listen, $25,000. This guy turns red, starts stuttering, and says, I promise you I brought the money. But while I was dancing with you, I put my jacket down. I left the money in my jacket. It must have been somebody stole the money. And this guy starts screaming, "You thief, you crook, you lowlife, you promised. I was an idiot. I should have asked you for the money before the chuppah. There would have never been a chuppah. I'm not letting my son go home with your daughter tonight." And the fight blows up. But this boy was a very strong boy. And he just got married to a girl that he likes, and he's not going to let his father mess his life up. And he goes to his father and he says, "Dad, listen, I'm married. And I promise you, if it's you or her, I'm taking her and not you. So either stay quiet or fight, do whatever you want, but we're going home." And the father says, "Okay, I'm not talking to you anymore." And there his relationship with his father ends for a year. He goes home with the girl feels extremely uncomfortable by everything that happens. This young couple pays a price for what went on, and right before the year was up, the girl wants to do something to try and make their life more pleasant. And she thinks to herself this: if we get our wedding video, and we make a public viewing and invite all our families and somehow convince them to all come, maybe the emotions will come back up of at least the beginning part of the wedding, which was a happy event, and people will realize we got married, it's a good thing, we stayed married for a year, that's better than all the statistics. Maybe that'll bring the hearts back together. And they do that. And this father says, "I'm not going to sit near him," and he says, "I'm not going to sit near him." They negotiate a peace treaty, everybody's showing up. They're watching the video. They see a beautiful chuppah, a first course, a second course, a third course, a singing production. Everything is amazing. And then they see the dance that took the last year down. And the camera was a widespread camera and got a very wide picture. And they see these two guys dancing. And then in the middle they see the guy going to the chair, taking his jacket off, putting it on. And then in that video they see one more thing. That the rich mechutin, while he's in the middle of dancing with his other mechutin, gets close to the chair, sticks a hand, grabs the money, sticks it in his pocket, and continues dancing. And everybody in the room sees that the thief was the one who was screaming. How would that guy feel like? What went through his mind when everybody saw that? He would look for any possible... He would prefer to die. Let the ground swallow him up in a second. And that's for what? For one time that he stole. Girls, after 120, this video is going to play. And it's not going to be our mechutin that's going to be there. It's going to be the great sages of the world that are going to be there, and God himself. And every time we stole a little Lashon Hara, stole a little not kosher, stole a little Chilul Shabbos, stole a little lack of tznius, stole a little... It's going to show. The Maharal says that the biggest Gehenna that there is exactly that. The embarrassment that the neshama has when everybody gets to see exactly the way his life was. There's only one way around that. And that's tshuva. Chazal teaches that a person who does tshuva, the segment of the sin of his video gets erased. But guess what? Erasing it alone is not enough. Because if somebody did most of his life's sins and towards the end of his life did tshuva, then he lived 120 years, but his video is going to be 10 minutes long. And that alone is going to be embarrassing, because that means he sinned his whole life. So God, by default, in order to protect his soul, goes and replaces the video with a mock character that instead of doing a sin is actually doing a good deed. So the time of the video is full. That's what the Gemara says, that somebody who does tshuva me'ahavas doinoisav nehefachim le'lischuyos. His sins that he did b'mezid, his biggest averis that he did, even the spiteful ones, as long as he did tshuva me'ahava, are now going to turn around, but not just turn around regularly. They're going to become mitzvahs. So on this video it shows in the most positive way. But the Yetzer Hara is smarter than that. And he's not going to let you do tshuva for free. The Sfarim bring down an amazing parable. There was a young boy who didn't have money. And he decided that the quickest way to make money is to heist a bank. But now, heisting a bank is not such an easy procedure. There's security cameras, there's this, there's that, there's alarms, there's shutdowns. Today they have all these bulletproof things in front of the tellers, everything they got. So he decided, if I'm going to go into the bank and try and steal money, I'm never going to make it. I got to figure out a way to find a guy who's carrying a large amount of money that's about to go into the bank and steal the money from him before he goes into the bank. And he sits outside the bank for days on a watch point, and he's observing person by person to see, is there anybody who brings large amounts of money to the bank? He meets a store owner. He identifies the store owner. This guy has a business, a retail business. They do a couple $100,000 a day of business. Every day at the end of the day, he counts all his registers, puts the money into a little satchel, a few $100,000 in cash, and goes to the bank to deposit. And he says, this is my guy. The only thing that's left is to figure out how at the entrance of a bank do we get this guy to let go of his satchel. This he can't figure out. One day he brainstorms an idea. He dresses up in the finest clothes. He walks into a suit store that's next door. He goes up to the owner and he tells the owner, I work for Mr. Rothschild. Mr. Rothschild, a rich man, one of the best clients of the store. And the guy says, oh wow, welcome, what can I do for you? He says, Mr. Rothschild sent me to get him a suit for his oldest son. So the guy looks at him and says, okay, I understand, but where's the son? He says, the son is at home and he doesn't want to come. He says, so how am I going to know what size to send? He says, well, we'll wait outside. We'll look for a person that's about the same size as the son. We'll bring him in. We'll ask him to try on the suit. If it fits, that's the right size. You'll know to send that to Mr. Rothschild. The guy says, great idea, thank you. And he's excited he's about to sell another suit. His little kid waits by the door. And he's patiently waiting until he sees our retail store owner walking towards the bank with his satchel of cash. He goes to the owner and he says, you see that guy? He's Mr. Rothschild's son's size. The owner of the store walks right up to this gentleman and says, sir, do you mind coming in and trying on a fine suit? And this guy says, why not? Hey, never know, maybe I'll like it, I'll buy it. Doesn't realize what's going on. Walks into the store, takes the suit, goes into the dressing room. In order to put it on, has to take his satchel of money out of his hand, puts it down. Puts on the suit, comes out, looks into the mirror. In the meantime, this young boy goes into the dressing room, grabs the satchel of cash, and goes running. This guy just realized that he was heisted a few $100,000. And his only choice at this point is to go chasing the guy and maybe getting a hold of his money back. He goes, takes a dash to the door of the store, and the store owner dashes to the door of the store too, and says, you're not going nowhere. And he says, why not? He says, you're wearing my suit. You either pay for it or you stay here. You don't walk out with my suit. And he says, but he stole my money. He said, I don't care. That's not my money. You're wearing my money. So either pay for it or you're not getting out of here. The kid gets away and steals the money. Comes Chazal and teaches us. This is exactly what the Yetzer Hara does to us all year. He takes you and he puts you on a new suit. Instead of the Rebbeinu Shalom suit, he chooses the suit for you. And he calls it modern European fashion. Normally he puts a brand name designer on it and also helps you have enough money to afford it. And he knows as long as he succeeded to put the suit on, you ain't getting out of his store. Because you're either going to pay the price first and then it's too late, or you got to take it off. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that if you look one way, even if you act another way, I don't hear you. There's certain things that are choismim b'fnei hatshuva, that block tshuva. One of them is the clothes we wear. In two different ways. For example, Chazal say that a person who wears shatnez, his prayers are not answered for 40 days. He could pray, he can cry, he could beg, but as long as the shatnez is on him, it doesn't go up. And Chazal also teaches if a person is not dressed modestly, you can beg, you can cry, you can pray. God doesn't hear the prayers of immodest people. The first thing a person got to do is take off the suit, and then we can go chase the robber, the Yetzer Hara, who stole our lives away from us in the past year. Maybe then we'll be able to get our real life back and build a better year next year. But in order to do that, a person has to be in control of their life. In order to do that, we have to feel like we're the real boss over what's going on with us. And not that we're dictated exactly what to do all the time. There's a famous, cute story. There was a guy who wanted to rob a bank. And he thought of a very creative idea. He said, if I'm going to go in like a civilian, pull out a gun, and ask for money, I'll get the money. But by the time I come to the door, the security guys are already going to nab me down and I'm done. So what do I do? And he thinks of a phenomenal solution. He says, I'm going to go and buy myself some officer clothing. I'll dress up like a cop. The gun that I have at that point won't be suspicious. I'm a cop. Cops have guns. I'll walk into the bank, I'll pull out my gun, I'll get the money, and when I run out, there'll be such chaos, nobody will suspect the cop for stealing, and I'll get away. And so he does. He gets the cop clothes, he puts them on, he plans the day, he plans the time, he goes up to the teller, sticks out the gun, gets the money, and starts running for the door. Chaos in the room, everybody's chasing, nobody knows who to chase. He gets out. A couple of blocks away, one of the cops picks up on what's going on, and he sees a cop running with a bag. That's not usual. If anything, he should be running towards the bank, not away from the bank. And he says, "This is my guy." Chases him down, knocks him to the floor, gets the gun away from him, and now has to secure him to bring him to prison. Has no car, no backup, and no radio. What's he going to do? This guy happened to be an undercover detective in civilian clothes, too. He thinks of a creative idea. His only piece of ammunition that he has is his handcuffs that are hidden in the back of his belt. Pulls his handcuffs out and is thinking of handcuffing the guy. Then he says, wait a second, if he's a strong guy, even though he's cuffed, he'll still get away. He'll run. I'm not feet cuffing him, I'm just handcuffing him. So he's even more creative and decides to do this. He takes the handcuffs and he puts one side on the thief, who's dressed up like a cop, and the other side on himself. And he's prancing like this, our undercover detective in civilian clothes and our police officer, the thief, down the streets of town. And a few blocks away, one of his friends sees him, and he sees a cop with his friend looking like a civilian in handcuffs walking towards the police department. And this guy realizes, tomorrow I'm making headlines that I'm the thief instead of this guy who's the real thief being known as the thief. So he goes to his friend and he tells his friend, I'm not the thief, I'm the cop. This guy's the thief. And the thief says, I'm not the thief, he's the thief. And the proof is, I'm dressed like the cop. He's not dressed like the cop. Now how do we know who's true? His friend tells him this. If you're the real cop, then you have the key to open up the handcuffs. Open them up, I want to see. And if you can't open up the handcuffs, then he's the cop and you're the thief, no matter what you'll say. Same exact things with our lives. Throughout the year, the Yetzer Hara does a great job. And he's a professional crook. And he puts us on handcuffs and he holds us real tight. Yetzer Hara is our best friend. It's embarrassing to admit it's his friendships. And he squeezes the handcuff on and says, you ain't going nowhere. Comes Chodesh Elul and we're trying to go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and convince him somehow that no, in reality, he's the thief. He just stole our good deeds. But we're the boss. We're the one who's trying to get him and trying to get back at him and trying to stay away from him. We don't want this friendship. And God looks at you in the face and says this. If you're really the boss, take the key and open the handcuffs. But as long as you stay cuffed to the Yetzer Hara, he's the boss and you're just following. And that's your best friend. If you want to come to Rosh Hashanah and have a rational case to God, there's only one way you can do it. To prove God that you have some sort of key in your hand to open up the chains that you fell into throughout the year. But as long as you can't show Hashem that you have something to open up, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have to accept not the screaming and not the praying. There's a famous story that spread a lot. I'll say it in first person, possibly it was used before. But it's a story that teaches us life. And it's a story that teaches us exactly the way Hashem feels about us these days. And hopefully tonight we'll also learn the way we should feel towards Hashem. Going on a train ride, Amtrak, Acela Express, from Boston to New York, sitting in first class. I'm in chair 2A. In chair 2B there's a hippie. Long hair, stinky clothes, ripped up t-shirt, little backpack, looks like a wreck. I like making conversation with anybody, even those who don't look so tempting. So I look at the guy and I say, what's your name? And my main concern was, how did a guy who looks like this afford a first class ticket? And the guy looks at me and says, leave me alone. What's your name? Leave me alone. What's your name? I said, okay, I tried 3 times, there's nobody to talk to. I'm looking around to see maybe there's a chair that I could change to, or the odor would be a little better, there's nowhere to go. I'm stuck with this guy for a 2.5 hour ride. Half an hour later into the ride, this guy's like, hey, see, he's making all these faces, doing weird things. I'm trying to figure out, well, what's his story? And again I tried. I said, sir, you live in Boston, you live in New York. I'm trying to make friendly conversation with him. Leave me alone. Whew, okay, sorry. Then I realized that he's not doing anything personal to me, because 5 minutes later, one of the stewards came up to him and said, can I get you something to drink? Can I bring you some food? And he looked at him and with the same tone of voice said, "Leave me alone." Okay. An hour and a half into the flight, this kid falls asleep. And as he falls asleep, he leans and his shirt pulls, and it was ripped as it is, so it opens a little more. And I see a horrific thing. Or maybe a beautiful thing, depending how you want to look at it. That around his neck, he's wearing a necklace, and it's a Star of David with Chai inside. I said, not only do I have a kook near me, he happens to be Jewish, which makes it so much more painful. Okay. About 20 minutes later, we're already almost in Penn Station. I said, I got to get this guy. Now, I don't know if what I'm going to have to do, but I'm getting him. And I look back at him and say, Star of David? And he says, yes. I said, you're Jewish? Let's not talk about it. I said, why not? Let's talk about it. No, let's not talk about it. I said, why not? He says, I'm freaking out. I said, what are you freaking out for? I'm Jewish too. Big deal. There's so many Jews in New York. It's almost Jewtown. So he says, no, I'm going through a lot in my mind right now. I said, do you want to share? He says, you wouldn't understand anyway. I said, no, it happens to be understanding people's my profession. You might get a free session. He looks at me and he says, you know what? I need a favor from you. Would you do me a favor? I said, depending what it is. No matter what it is, would you do me a favor? I said, no, I'm not going to lie to you. He said, so under what conditions would you do me a favor? I said, if it's not voiding any law or halachic law and doesn't endanger me or my family, no matter what it is, I'll do you a favor. But otherwise, those things are off territory. He says, no, it's something that'll only take you 3 seconds. I said, fine. He says, listen to me good, let me tell you my story. Because when I was 17 years old, I was the guy who invented a certain computer software. And I went from being a young poor kid who grew up in a Orthodox home to being a multi-millionaire overnight. I sold my patent for many, many millions of dollars. Money got to me. I'm 17. I'm a young kid. I have millions and millions of dollars in the bank, and I'm getting residuals every single month from this patent that I sold for 10 years. And as the money went up and the fame went up, the Yiddishkeit went down. It's a pasuk, Vayishman Yishurum Vayivat. When things go well, we kick God. He says then, first I decided it's time to leave yeshiva. I got to go into business. And then from business I decided I have to modernize. I got to look good. I got to be friendly. I got to this. I got to that. And then from there I decided I got to get a secular education. I went to some sort of Ivy League school. From there I decided I got to do. He says, as I'm getting my degree in school, during the same period of time, I fall in love with a girl. She happened to be not Jewish. I didn't care. We dated for a while. I proposed to her. I called my parents and told her, Dad, Mom, I got engaged. And they said, to who? And I said, to this and this girl. I said, that's not a Jewish name. He says, no, she's not Jewish. He says, my mother on the phone almost had a heart attack. She's crying to me. She said, what are you doing? It's bad enough you moved away from the home and you became a total goy. Now you want to marry a shiksa too? What's wrong with you? And as soon as I heard that, I said, Mommy, I know that every single Jewish mother is a travel agent for guilt trips. Do me a favor. I'm not interested. And I clicked the phone on her. That was the last contact I had with my parents. I got married to this girl, had 2 children with her in 3 years. After 3.5 years, I made a very, very big business mistake that cost me everything I had. I went from being rich to bankrupt and poor overnight. As soon as I lost my money, I was no longer worth a thing to my spouse, and my wife that I thought loved me decided to leave me. Not only did she leave me, she pressed charges against me, got me locked up. I just got done a prison sentence for no real good reason. I was in the can for over 6 months. I don't have rights to see my kids because the court said that I'm dangerous for my children. I have nothing. I tried to get a regular job, but nobody was willing to take me. I had to go homeless. For 9 nights now, I've been living under a bridge. And one night, we were having talks between the homeless people there. Each one was saying his life story, and I said mine too. One of the guys that was there is an older guy. He's 70 years old. He's a well-experienced homeless man. He's been homeless since he's 40. He looks at me and says, you don't have to be homeless. And I said, why not? He says, because you have family. I said, no, I don't. I cut off from my family 10 years ago. He says, so what? Blood relatives will always come through and help. The person who cares about you most is your own relative. And I said, that's not true. They hate me because of what I've done. And he says, no, if you'll go back to them, they'll accept you in open arms. And I said, how do I know? He says, you have nothing to lose. Try. And he gives me advice. He says, take a pen and paper and write your mom and dad a letter. Write that letter from your heart. Write, dear mom and dad, things went bad. I realize that your way is right, my way is wrong. I'm left without anything, I'm homeless, I'm living under a bridge, that's why there is no return address on this envelope. I plan on putting together money to take a one-way trip from Boston to New York. If you don't want to see me ever again in my life because of what I've done, I totally understand you, you have the right to say no. But in case you do want to see me, I'll be taking this train that gets there at 2:31 p.m. Outside the door of the train there's a pole. When I walk out, I'm going to look at the pole. If I see a white ribbon, I know you accepted me. And then I'll look for the house and I'll come back home. But if the white ribbon's not there, you'll never hear from me again, and the odds are I'll look for my eternal death. He looks at me and says, in 3 minutes the train is coming to the station. And I'm scared. Will the ribbon be there or not? I'm quiet. What should I say? And he says, and I want to ask you for a favor. And this is what you have to do for me. Can you get off the train first and go look at that pole and see if the ribbon is there? I said, that's it? He says, yeah. I said, fine. We get to the train station. The door's open. I'm the first by the door. We walk outside. I look at the pole. And the entire pole is covered in white. I walk back to the train. The guy's trembling. And I say, your family's waiting behind the pole. Go say hello to Mom. Last year, Yom Kippur, we promised Hashem the world. I'm going to be, and I'm going to do, and I'm going to change, and I'm going to fix, and I'm going to correct, and I'm going to grow, and. And this year, Erev Rosh Hashanah, we realized that our promises weren't that successful. Yeah, of course, we came a long way, but all in all, you're right. And at the same time, possibly our neshama went partially bankrupt. Maybe not chapter 11, maybe I don't know what, but somewhere along the way. And now we're starting to realize, wait a second, what did I do? I messed up. Something's going wrong. Something has to change. And we want to go back to God. And every single Jew in the world wants to go back to God at one level or the other. And the only thing that holds us back is at the end of the day, shame and guilt. We're embarrassed and we're scared. Chazal teach us on Yom Kippur. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, they set out a Sari La'azazel. And before they sent out the Sari La'azazel, they hung up a red ribbon in the Beis HaMikdash. And the way they knew if Hashem accepted them back was if the red ribbon turned into white or not. If the white ribbon hung, then God said, welcome home. And if not, then He didn't. But every single year, no matter what, the ribbon turned white. We're on the train ride back home. In just a few days, we stand by Yom Adin. And 9 days after that, we stand on the Day of Forgiveness. And we want to make sure that when we get off that train, there is a pole. And that pole is covered with white ribbon, that we know that Hashem took us back. But in order to do that, first we have to prepare the letter. First we got to write to God, I'm sorry, your way was right and my way was wrong. And believe what we're really writing. It's never too late. It's never too late for anybody. In the 6.5 years that Hashem gave me the schus to be around the world trying to help Jewish people from every single background, I've seen the kids that drifted off in the farthest ways came back to be the biggest success stories. One of my earlier experiences, and this is when I was still considerably new, I was speaking in some sort of Shabbaton, and a young boy walks up to me, he identifies himself by name, tells me a last name, and he tells me he's from Israel, the son of this and this Rosh Hashiva. And I almost fainted seeing the way he looked. He was dressed completely off, but okay, that's a matter of choice, don't judge a book by its cover. And his 2 earrings were pierced, and he didn't have diamond studs, he had 2 crosses in his 2 ears. And he looks at me and says, I converted to Christianity. And I heard that you know a lot about religion and you battle Christians all the time. I want to have a good fight with you. Do you have time? And I looked at my watch and I knew I was on my way to Mincha, and I said, God doesn't want my Mincha right now. God wants me to sit down with this kid. And I said, yeah, I got time. And I looked back at him and I said, you got honesty? And he says, yes, I do. I said, so here's the deal. We're going to sit. It might take an hour, it might take 10. Of all I care, it can take 36. Something's going to change. Either I walk out of this room wearing 2 crosses in my ears, or you walk out of this room wearing my pair of tzitzis. Pick your choice. says, you got a deal. I said, can I get it in writing? He says, why? You don't trust me? I said, I trust you. But just in case the Yetzer Hara gets the best of you and you don't take the crosses out and put on the yarmulke, I want a piece of paper that I could flash at you every time I see you again in my life that'll eat your heart out. And one day you'll come back. He says, you got it. And he takes a piece of paper and he writes. And then he looks at me and says, can I get a piece of paper too? I said, I'll give you this piece of paper, but I have another condition to it. So he says, what? I said, if you walk out of here with a black yarmulke on you, you don't take the paper with you, we rip it up, I don't need evidence on the street. And he says, deal, let's go. And we sit down. We have a conversation that lasts 14 hours and 45 minutes. And at the end of the 14 hours and 45 minutes, the guy says, do you have a pair of tzitzis? And I took off mine and it says, here it is. And he puts on the pair of tzitzis. And then I look at him and say, can I get your crosses? He says, what are you going to do with them? I said, it's Avodah Zarah, it's Osaba. No, the only thing you're allowed to do with these things is flush them down the toilet. He says, can I watch? I said, no, actually, you're going to put them in and I'm going to flush. And that was a deal we made. He makes this move and I see him like shaking completely and I say, now tell me one thing. Which way felt better? And he says, honestly, I need a day to digest. I said, fair enough, I'll meet you in a day. Not even 10 minutes later, he's looking for me. He said, I got to talk to you. I said, what? He says, do you think I'm crazy? I said, no, actually you're a genius. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, I spoke to you for 14 hours and 45 minutes and you challenged anything and everything that I said, and none of it was with an emotional case. You were up to date on some of the most updated pieces in medicine, science, religious battles, and anything and everything straight across the education board. It's hard for me to believe that you're as young as you say you are. So he says, so doesn't that raise questions about you? I said, what questions? He said, if I was so smart, how could have I been such an idiot? I said, sometimes you're a little too smart, you go over the edge, so you're back to zero again. He says, no, you don't understand. Nobody ever explained anything to me. I said, okay. We ended the conversation, I gave him every way to reach me. I said, if you ever want anything, call me, and we moved on. I think it was about 2 years later. I get an email from this guy, hi Rabbi Yagen, my name is Moti so-and-so. I just wanted to give you the good news. Thank God I got married a few weeks ago, and I'm moving to Israel. I sent him back an email. Honestly, I don't know who you are, but Mazel Tov, one way or the other, I'm really happy to hear that another Jewish guy is building up a home, and the fact that you're moving to Israel is even more beautiful. God bless you, I hope you have a happy life. He sends me back an email with no words. It has a picture, a copy and paste from a jewelry store, 2 crosses. And he says, this is who I am. And I send him back an email that has a picture, a copy and paste of a toilet, and says, this is who I am. And we lost contact. I think it was about a year later. And once again I get an email, hi Rabbi, again it's Mati, my wife is pregnant, she's due any day. If it's a boy, you're going to hold the baby by the bris. Would you come to Israel to hold the baby? I said, Mati, I don't know, let me know, let's figure it out and we'll see. His wife was a little bit overdue, and from here to there she ended up having a baby. The bris came out the day of my brother's wedding, and honestly I wanted to go, but I wouldn't do that to my brother. I was in Israel a couple of months later, and I decided I want to see my grandson. Al Pi Halacha, it's my grandchild. And I called up Mati, by now I had his number, and I said, Mati, I'm in Israel, I want to come visit you, is that okay? He said, of course it's okay, come over. And I said, okay, I'm coming. And I walk into the house about a couple of hours later, and it was an extremely emotional thing. When I walked, I didn't recognize him. And honestly, it was a little bit embarrassing when I met him, so he looked like who knows what, and I looked the same way I do today. And by now he's with a long beard and payas and this and that. He looks like a half a rabbi, 3/4 of a rabbi, whatever he's up to. And I walk in and he's looking at me and I said, oh wow, Mati, you came a long way. He says, I sure did. So I said, what happened? So he said, you explained it to me. He introduces me to his wife. I hold his kid for a little while. And we start, and again, we're talking. And he tells me, again, I plan on going on a tour around the world. A tour around the world for one and only one purpose. I want to go speak to the youth and show them my picture from when I was a young kid and I was religious. And then show them my picture being converted into Catholicism, into Christianity. And then show them my picture with 2 crosses in my ears. And then show them a picture of you. And then show them myself. And explain them one thing and only one thing that every Jewish boy and girl has to learn. And this is what we have to walk away with tonight. No matter how close or how far you ever are, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is right there waiting, and he says, my arms are open. Just come into them. I got a huge hug for you too. Just come. He might not pull you in, because he has to give you freedom of choice, and you have to be the one to choose. But as soon as you make the choice to make the initial step, God promises that from there on, you're already in my arms. This is the step that we have to make tonight. We have to come to Hashem and say, whatever was. That's not the issue now. But we're making that one step closer. And we're not starting by the hardest things. We're actually starting by the easiest things. I want to explain why and with this why. In the olden way of doing tzitzis, today there are a very small minority of Jews that still do this, even though it's very controversial in today's day and age. But in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, when they still had the fish called the chalozim, they used to wear tzitzis, and one of the strings were blue. The Gemara says, "Godel oinshei shel lovon mi oinshei shel tcheles." If somebody doesn't wear tzitzis, the punishment that he'll get in Gehenna for not wearing the white strings is a lot greater than the punishment in Gehenna that he'll get for not wearing the blue string. Why is that? The Rishonim explain on the spot. White strings are extremely accessible. They take no effort to get. God comes to a person and says, it was so easy for you to get those white strings. You couldn't do it for me? That's a lot worse than something that took an effort, which at least is somewhat excusable. It was so hard I couldn't do it. So we want to take now in Elul the Mahalach HaTshuva. The Mahalach HaTshuva has to start with the easy things. With the little small things that take no effort. But it's just a zilzal, we don't care. And if we can correct the little details in our life, A, it's more realistic to last as we spoke last week. But more important, at least we show God that what is easy for us, that we do. And that's our one step closer to Hashem. And there's no doubt that if we make just that one step, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting there with open arms. He takes us right back in and he says, my dearest child, welcome home. Thank you for listening and have a good night.